You're seeing it now in England where people are getting arrested for tweets. 4,000 people have been arrested in England for thought crimes. So susceptible to manipulation. And that's what's really scary about the time that we're living in, because we have so much access to information, but yet so many people are willing to put the blinders on and go full steam ahead with whatever their team wants.
If you've been paying attention to the news, then you'd know that the United Kingdom is currently facing something of a crisis. The country is just fresh off an election that saw it change regimes, and it appears that the outcome of this election has only been Joe Rogan. Something big is about to happen. In the UK, the catalyst that has set off even more riots and infighting among the British people. To hear many experts explain it, the riots and crises in the United Kingdom have been a long time coming. A mixture of political, social, and economic challenges has left the British people on edge, and it seems that the people are now left with no choice but to vent in the only way they know how. Still, there are also indications that something even worse could be coming in the great UK. And as several top names are now coming to find out, this country could be in for a very long road before recovery. So what exactly happened to the UK? And what signs have prompted experts to prepare people to expect the worst? Let's dive into the entire root of this history in this video.
400 people now have been arrested, 100 have been charged, some in relation to online activity, and a number of them are already in court.
The UK's fraught political timeline. So if you've been paying attention to the social landscape across the world, you'd understand that there has been a lot of tension recently. The tension appeared to have boiled over, building up over the past decade or so to the point we are today. And in many ways, the current state of things appears to be the next phase of the evolution. Although there are signs that extend even longer, the tension in our political landscape really became evident in 2016. Following the election of President Donald Trump in the United States, it appeared that the outcome of the election was highly contested. Even years after his election, Trump was the subject of several probes and lawsuits, with some even believing that he had help from the Russian government, which interfered in the election. Now, the purpose of this section isn't necessarily to say that one side is right and one side is wrong. At the end of the day, everyone's free to believe what they want and stand on whichever side of the political spectrum they choose. However, the truth remains that Trump was easily the most consequential head of state we've seen in a very long time. As president, Trump was shown the immense power that his office held, and he used it in a way that shook the entire world. Whether it was pulling America out of the Paris Climate Agreement, choosing to take American troops out of Afghanistan, threatening to stop supplying NATO allies with military assistance, or even advocating for Russia to return to the G7, Trump wasn't shy of using his office to enact policies which he believed would benefit the country and its interests. As you would imagine, these moves were very controversial. Trump's critics claimed that he was out of control and that his actions would only harm America's standing as the global superpower that other countries could look up to. At the same time, his supporters cheered him on, explaining that his style of governance and international relations was a necessary shock to a system that had become obsolete and in need of a refresh. Besides the incredible influence that he held over the Republican Party and the US government as a whole, Trump's rise also led to the rise of several similar politicians across the world. We already know the classic strongmen types that ruled the world: Russia's Vladimir Putin, China's Xi Jinping, India's Narendra Modi, and more. But with Trump now in the fray, several other similar politicians soon rose to prominence as well. Jair Bolsonaro, a far-right politician, became the president of Brazil in 2019. That same year, Modi won a landslide re-election campaign in India. Over in the United States, Trump's rise helped fuel the ascent of Britain's Conservative Party. Boris Johnson, a man whom many described as the British Trump, became Prime Minister in 2019, with his rise mostly coming on the back of his promise to get Britain's exit from the United Kingdom, or Brexit for those who recall, done. Well, Boris did indeed get Brexit done. However, despite this, his tenure was mostly known for being quite tumultuous. From gaffes to personal scandals and much more, Boris seemed to bumble from one PR disaster to the next. In a way, he really was the British Trump. And to make things worse, the Brexit deal he brokered and championed ended up not being what many in Britain expected. The deal was fraught with several issues, and it seemed like the people of Britain ended up worse off as a result. If only they had known what they were getting themselves into, right? Anyways, even with everything, Boris remained in power. But things changed in late 2021 when reports emerged that government and Conservative Party staff had engaged in social gatherings at Downing Street, the office of the Prime Minister, just ahead of Christmas in 2020. This was at a time when the government had instituted strict stay-at-home policies for everyone else. Boris denied the allegations, of course, but after video proof showed the parties, he was forced to apologize to the British people.
Mr. Speaker, I want to apologise.
The controversies continued for him, and by the middle of 2022, the Conservative Party announced a vote of confidence in him. In the weeks following, the entire party was in disarray, and by July, several of Boris's top staff members had resigned. That same month, he announced that he'd be stepping down from his position as Prime Minister.
Of the Parliamentary Conservative Party, that there should be a new leader, and I've today appointed a cabinet to serve as I will until a new leader is in place.
Boris's departure from Downing Street meant the Conservative Party needed someone else to take the reins of power, and that person ended up being Liz Truss. I don't blame you if you don't remember much about Liz Truss. The moment she got into power in September 2022, she immediately formed her cabinet and set sights on tax reform. This was a period when many Brits were facing a serious cost of living crisis, so everyone expected Liz to devise a policy to address this and give the people some breathing room. But what did Liz do? Well, under her plan, Liz proposed cutting taxes for the wealthy. It also included policies such as cutting stamp duty and the basic rate of income tax and canceling rises in national insurance contributions and corporation tax. Everyone received the proposal poorly, mostly because it only included temporary spending measures and tax cuts. Immediately after this proposal saw the light of day, Britain's pound fell to its lowest ever rate against the dollar, and the Bank of England literally had to step in to prevent an economic meltdown. Once again, the British people got the brunt of it. This budget proposal was so bad that it basically began a cascade of events that led to Liz herself resigning from the Prime Minister position in October, literally just 6 weeks after she was appointed.
I cannot deliver the mandate that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party.
She remains the shortest-serving Prime Minister in Britain's history, and that gap isn't even close in the slightest. In fact, Liz's reign as Prime Minister was so short that a British newspaper literally trolled her by bringing out a head of lettuce and tracking whether the vegetable would last longer than her stay at 10 Downing Street. And you know the worst thing? Their predictions were spot on. The lettuce literally did indeed last longer than her. I mean, imagine being so bad at your job that you literally lose a joke contest. Anyways, with Liz now gone, Britain's parliament was in a shambolic state. However, in October 2022, Rishi Sunak was appointed Prime Minister, the first British Asian to take office. You see, the issue with Rishi was that he was kind of emblematic of the times. This here was a man who, along with his wife, was worth close to $900 million. By most estimates, he was the richest individual who ever held the position of Prime Minister. In fact, his personal net worth made him wealthier than King Charles. Like many before him, Sunak's policies also focused on helping big business. He also proposed tax cuts, and his administration oversaw some steep cuts to social security initiatives. All of this was happening at a time when the British people were facing the worst cost of living crisis in a generation. You see, as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, governments all around the world were quick to print money and distribute to people as relief. Of course, the British government did the same, distributing funds to the tune of almost £500 billion, according to some estimates. The problem, however, was that there was no plan to eventually take this money out of circulation. And when the global economy began to rebound, this excess cash led to massive inflation across all countries. Once again, Britain wasn't left out. Between 2020 and 2024, the cost of pretty much everything in Britain skyrocketed. Housing, food, utilities, healthcare, and other basic necessities became out of reach for millions of people, and it seemed like there was no logical way for the country to recover from this. To make things worse, you had governments that exacerbated the issue by implementing tax cuts for big businesses and the wealthiest of the wealthy. And unlike what most of these government officials promised, these gains didn't trickle down to the common man. It was literally a case of the rich getting rich and the poor getting poorer. Now, to his credit, Sunak didn't necessarily have much of the controversies that his predecessors did. Unlike Boris Johnson, he didn't host parties while everyone was ordered to stay indoors or get caught in almost one lie per day. Unlike Liz Truss, he didn't promote a budget plan that almost tanked the economy. Still, the writing on the wall was pretty glaring for Sunak. His policies, although not as hardline as some of the stuff we had seen in the past, were pretty unpopular, especially among young people. And as I already mentioned earlier, the fact that he was an incredibly wealthy man meant that he always came across as being out of touch or unable to relate to the struggles of the average British person. So it wasn't like Sunak was an inherently bad guy. At the end of the day, every politician makes policies that people don't like. But for him, it was more of just a case of terrible timing. In a world where the cost of living was skyrocketing and people didn't have any saving grace, citizens expected a prime minister who could come in and immediately effect changes that they wanted to see. Under Sunak, things actually did get worse. Now, it's not as if the worsening of conditions was entirely Sunak's fault. Remember, this was a period where the entire global economy struggled. However, Sunak's policies didn't exactly make things any better. Add this to the fact that his party was becoming increasingly unpopular due to the scandals of the previous administrations, and you can see that he wasn't exactly in the best of positions. Where we are today, by May 2024, Sunak announced that King Charles had asked him to call a general election for July. The move was a shock to his own members of parliament, especially when they found that he had the chance to actually wait until December. However, feeling confident in his policies, Sunak believed that the results he had shown, such as they were, would be enough to reinforce the Conservatives' election message. In the month before the election, Sunak pulled out all the stops. He released a new manifesto outlining his plan for revitalizing the economy, as well as how he planned to address issues such as welfare, childcare, education, the environment, and energy. But it wasn't enough. When the elections came, it was clear that the people had had enough of conservative rule. Sunak was voted out, with Labour candidate Keir Starmer becoming the new prime minister. So now you're all caught up on Britain's political history over the past couple of years. You might be asking yourself, well, how is Keir Starmer doing as British PM? Well, the answer is it's a pretty mixed bag. To begin with, Starmer is a man whom not many people even knew about before he became prime minister. And I'm not saying that as an outside observer. It is indeed true that the man didn't exactly have a clear set of discernible attributes before being elected.
For Keir Starmer, still over half of the population don't really perceive that they know what he stands for, and only 1 in 5 people say that he's good in a crisis or indeed has a personality.
It would appear that the people were really just tired of being ruled by Conservatives, so they went on to choose the next best thing. And that next best thing happened to be Keir Starmer, the front-runner of the Labour Party. They didn't necessarily look to check what he stood for, and they didn't think to care. All they wanted was someone who looked familiar and stood on some comfort rhetoric, and Starmer gave them all that. Ever since Starmer rose to the position of Prime Minister, the entire British landscape has been a bit unstable. On the one hand, there has been some improvement in the economy as things look to be bouncing back very gradually. On the other hand, social unrest and unease have been the order of the day in the United Kingdom. Over the past few weeks, there have been multiple reports of riots and demonstrations happening in pockets of the country. These riots have had some casualties, with some of them literally devolving into physical altercations between groups and sects within the nation. So, what caused these riots particularly? The political dilemma. On July 29th, 6-year-old Bebe King, 7-year-old Elsie Stancombe, and 9-year-old Alice Da Silva Aguiar were killed in an unfortunate turn of events at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class in Southport. Along with these girls, 8 other children sustained injuries, with 5 of them being left in critical condition. The incident also left 2 adults terribly hurt. Eventually, authorities charged Alex Rudakubana, a 17-year-old born in Cardiff and living in Banks, a village in Lancashire a few miles north of Southport, with the crime. However, before the identity of the suspect was confirmed, several false claims proliferated across social media that the crime had been perpetrated by a Muslim asylum seeker who had gotten to the UK by boat. In the wake of these false claims, several members of the far right gathered in cities and towns across the United Kingdom to protest. Many of these gatherers wielded inflammatory slogans, and it became clear pretty quickly that these gatherings would lead to even worse outcomes. Before long, counter-protests sprung up as well, leading to severe physical clashes on several occasions. The riots have so far been the most prominent topic to come out of the United Kingdom. At the moment, the entire world is looking to the country to see how things play out. Business operations have been significantly hampered, flights are being grounded, and the livelihoods of millions across the country are now being affected. Free speech under attack. As you would imagine, several people have voiced their opinions on the current riots across the United Kingdom. Many believe that the outcome and resolution of this conflict will set a strong tone going forward, especially with how social balances are seen by the current administration. Of course, the biggest topic so far has been that of immigration. For years, immigration has become a major topic in developed countries. Once again, this is a trend that we can attribute majorly to Donald Trump. When he ran for president of the United States back in 2016, Trump ran on a staunch anti-immigration policy. At the time, Trump came down on the subject of illegal immigration, while also instituting policies that made it more challenging for certain groups of people to enter the United States the way they used to. In response to this, several notable politicians across several countries have taken similar stances. In the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson championed this. And to a considerable degree, the Conservative Party has continued to preach this message. The argument of the Conservatives, as well as their supporters, is pretty simple. If there is widespread and unchecked immigration, the UK runs the risk of losing its identity. The country is already finding it very challenging to cater to its citizens. If immigrants are added to the mix, there will only be more of a battle for resources that need to go around. To support this argument, some reports show up to 70% of new jobs being created going to immigrants. At the same time, other reports point to immigrants competing with citizens for things like access to health care and other social benefits. So for those who support stricter immigration policies, the solution is simple. Make it much harder for these immigrants to come in, and improvements should be seen in the economy. On the other hand, there are those who believe that a much more flexible immigration policy is necessary. To be fair, these people, many of which tend to vote for the Labour Party, are not for completely open borders. Instead, they focus more on making it easier for foreigners to get their legal immigration status. As they argue, the diversity in the United Kingdom is one of its biggest strengths, and if the country is able to attract skilled people who can contribute to the economy, then everyone leaves all the better for it. Still, like every other topic, there have been arguments over this, and the people are usually the ones who tend to make the demonstrations, as we have seen across the country in the past few weeks. Besides all of this, the riots in the United Kingdom have also raised the conversation about free speech and the consequences of speaking your mind. Now, if you know anything about our current political landscape, it's that there seems to have been a major sticking point. In our modern society, most of our speech is being posted and expressed online, with social media platforms and online forums being the town halls where people come together to share ideas and speak about the issues bothering them. However, the past few years have also shown that social media platforms have not exactly lived up to their billing as bastions of free speech. In the wake of the 2020 elections in the United States, many people expressed their concerns about cases of election interference. Once again, Donald Trump was at the forefront of these calls. He believed that the election had been stolen from him and that it was his right to investigate this. Trump and his legal team did file several lawsuits, with most of them coming up short and not being able to provide any concrete evidence of election interference. Nevertheless, this hasn't stopped the former president from staking his claim everywhere. In response to Trump's claims, several social media platforms, including his favorite, Twitter, moved to ban him as they claimed that he was spreading misinformation. Things got even worse following the riots at the United States Congress on January 6, 2021, with social media platforms taking steps to restrict Trump's accounts on the basis that he had been inciting the violence. Trump was eventually charged with inciting the January 6th riots, but away from the legal arguments, many claim that social media platforms were wrong to have censured the former president. In fact, several politicians and thought leaders on the Republican side called for these platforms to be more controlled, as it appeared that they had launched a campaign against free speech. The need to protect free speech is what led billionaire Elon Musk to purchase Twitter in the latter part of 2022. At the time, Musk claimed he would not mind sparing any expense to protect Twitter because he believed the platform had turned into society's online town square. And if people were not comfortable speaking their minds on Twitter for fear of being blocked or having their accounts taken down, then it would be a huge blow to free speech and other aspects of personal freedom. When Musk took over Twitter, one of the first things he did was to loosen the platform's content moderation policies. At the same time, he reinstated the accounts of several people who had their accounts taken down for violating the platform's policies. As you would imagine, this has had a dual effect. On the one hand, many have claimed that inflammatory speech on Twitter has increased as a result of Musk's policies. At the same time, many brands have also paused spending on ads due to fear of their ads appearing beside what they term hateful content. Still, many of Musk's supporters have claimed this is a good thing, and even Musk has been defiant in the face of an advertiser boycott.
Don't advertise.
You don't want them to advertise?
No.
What do you mean?
So if somebody's gonna try to blackmail me with advertising, blackmail me with money, go yourself.
Now, to tie things back to the United Kingdom, there have been reports that the government is now closely watching citizens' social media accounts to police their speech, especially in relation to the riots that have been going on. In an interview with news reporters, Keir explained that his government is also focusing on people who might be inciting these riots via their social media posts.
In relation to online and social media, the first thing I'd say is this is not a law-free zone. Today we're due sentencing for online behaviour. That's a reminder to everyone.
The moment this interview got out, everyone was on high alert, and immediately it set off conversations about government policing of social media platforms and what this could mean. While many have claimed that this isn't much to worry about, there are those who believe that the government could be overstepping here. One such person is Joe Rogan, the comedian and host of The Joe Rogan Experience. Since founding his podcast in the late 2000s, Joe has grown it to become the most popular online podcast in the world. And as many of his fans have come to know, Joe has an opinion on just about everything. Speaking with fellow content creator Bob Glyman, Joe decried the current state of things, as well as what he believed to be the British government trying to hamper free speech.
People getting arrested for tweets, cracking down on bad tweets and things like that. I think there's something like 4,000 people have been arrested in England for thought crimes.
Joe went on to explain his issue with this, as well as the fact that the government appears to want to have a complete say over what is acceptable and not. Joe's argument delved into the current state of things, and it was really quite staggering.
So it says 395 arrests have been made by 29 UK police forces for Section 127 offenses, which is used for cases of online abuse. According to the article, 1,696 people were subsequently charged. Section 127 offenses cover harassment that takes place via electronic communications network.
I don't know about you guys, but it sure seems like a concerted effort to police people's posts online. And as Joe himself has put it, this could indeed get worse. What if the government decides to expand its definition of what is acceptable? Does it mean it will begin censoring content that isn't in line with the ruling party's ideology? These really are the issues. However you slice it, there's no doubt that we live in a divided time. Still, many experts believe that solving this division doesn't require shutting down the views of specific people and preventing them from voicing their opinions. For now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Joe's concern is valid? Let us know in the comments.